Children of the Night, Chapter 21 Falling Apart. Chrysalis was pacing the throne room of Canterlot Castle. Her spies in the Everfree Forest had reported that a large group of ponies had left the Garden of Shadows. The group had split into three, each led by an alicorn. She had planned to have her drones from Appaloosa intercept the one heading south, while those in the hive were to flank the group in the east. However, her messengers had returned with dire news. Appaloosa was recaptured, and she hadn't noticed a single thing. That in itself was not so bad, since the town was not that big. Only about 2,000 ponies lived there, so she could easily take the loss. What had left her speechless, however, had been the report of the messenger she had sent to her hive. The hive she had built up for so many centuries was now nothing more than a crater in the ground with no survivors. That event had made one thing painfully clear to her. Her connection to her drones was weakening. Had it been as strong as usual, she would have felt that many deaths for sure. This was a big problem, but she could set it aside as long as they stayed loyal. Right now, she had sent word to all occupied cities in the west and east. In the south there were only a few mining camps. That would not hurt her cause, were they to be lost. The drones, however, were another matter entirely, so she had ordered all of them back to strengthen her defenses. The fight was coming her way, and her hive was destroyed. She had to act, and start breeding more drones as fast as she could. All her egg reserves had been in the hive. That afternoon found Chrysalis in the former dungeons of the castle. All day since that morning she had intercourse with her drones. Now it was the time to lay eggs. She forced her body to double the number she would usually have been able to produce. It hurt, but it had to be done. Soon the entire dungeons were one sticky mess of green slime. In it, along the walls, were thousands of eggs that would be ready to join her cause in only a few days. Chrysalis lay panting in one of the former cells, her lower body bleeding badly. She knew she had overdone it a bit, but she was unwilling to give up her grasp over Equestria, now that she had finally conquered it. Twilight Sparkle was still staring vacantly into nothingness, and her remaining friends were more than worried. Applejack, who was mostly asleep these days, since she had caught an infection, so her medication had to be increased, had missed most of it. Rarity and Pinky tended to their friends as good as they could, but they also mourned for their fallen friend. They all knew that Fluttershy had died while helping the princess ascend again. That she had died for a noble task, however, did not make it hurt any less. While Rarity was the one that treated Applejack and fed Twilight, Pinky was usually using her training weights to vent some of her anger. She was sad about her friend's death, but her hatred blotted out even that. They had caused all of this. The changelings would have to pay for what they did to her friends. She would make sure of that. Pinky, you really could help me with them. Taking care of Twilight is taxing enough, since I have to make her swallow every bite I give her. She will come around. Give her time. We need to get ready for the battle. Whatever are you talking about, dear? We still have the elements, but without Fluttershy we can't use them. There won't be a... I don't need the elements to fight. What do you think I trained for so much, Rarity? You could also need some toughening up. No way, Pinky. We can't fight them in our current state. I am unable to use magic, Applejack can barely move her legs without screaming in pain, and Twilight has buried herself in her own little world. What do you think we could possibly do? Make them pay? What? I said we will make them pay. For Twilight, for Fluttershy, for every pony they hurt. Rarity sighed. Adding to her worries about Twilight and Applejack, she also worried about Pinky lately. The usually so happy pony had become more and more aggressive over the last few weeks. If this went any farther, she would surely do something foolish. That night, Rarity had turned in for the night, after making sure Twilight and Applejack lay in their own beds and were clean. With them in a state like this, they couldn't even use the restroom. Pinkie checked the tunnel that led up to Rarity's and Applejack's cell. As she saw there was no light coming from there, she got her trampolas from under her bed and put them on. After that, she walked over to a bookshelf that held several medical reference guides. For the last few days she had used her metal trampolas to dig through the soft earth behind the shelf, and tonight she finally broke through. She had looked everywhere else, but this was the only spot that did not consist of hard rock, which was too hard for her trampolas to cut through. She stuck her head out of the hole she had made and looked around. To her delight, she could see that she had landed in the basement of some building, so no changeling was around. Carefully, Pinkie extracted herself from the tunnel and placed several sacks of flour in front of it, to hide it from view. She made a mental note to herself to find something to cover it up better for the next time. She was sorry deep inside that she had to do this, but her friends were just no help right now, and she could not wait to finally get back at the changelings for what they had done. Carefully going up the wooden stairs that led up from the basement, she looked around the main room of what looked like a bakery. Carefully, not to make too much noise with her trampolas, she walked to one of the windows. Due to the night outside and the unlit store, she saw several changelings patrolling the streets outside. She knew she ought to be careful, and she also knew that she originally only wanted to gather some information for her future outings. But right now she saw red. Her anger overwhelmed Pinkamena Diana Pie, and she lunged through the closed window at the 5 changelings outside. The shallow cuts on her face and flanks she suffered from this she barely registered. The changelings were utterly surprised by the pink pony attacking them, so their reaction was delayed a little. That delay, however, had been enough for the party thrower extraordinaire to grab one of the closest to her and twist his neck. She did so with no hesitation and no remorse. She did not even feel effort breaking his neck. Her training was really showing in the light of the street lamps now. Her formerly plump frame was now muscular, and every time she exhaled, steam came from her nostrils, indicating her fury. The second changeling fell to one of her trampler-clad hooves, as she spun around and hit him with her right foreleg. The still stunned guard flew several hooves, crashed into the side of a building, and lay motionless. The other 3 regained their composure and started to attack Pinkie hoof to hoof, but the pink party pony dodged their attacks with practiced ease. It was just like playing Dodgeball Extreme, which was one of her favorite games. When one of the changelings fell back and shot a magical bolt at her, Pinkie jumped back from her attackers onto the wall of the shop she had emerged from, and bucked at it mid-flight, sending herself flying at the magic user. "Cheater!" she screamed, as her left foreleg connected with the changeling's right temple and sent him flying. The other 2 reacted quickly, chasing after her, but her hind legs had already reared up into the air again, bucking at one of them. The other one did hit her with a painful blow to her flank, and Pinkie shrank away from him, dodging another blow that came her way. She was now facing only one opponent, but something was wrong. The ground beneath her was slippery, and she found it hard to hold her balance. As she looked down for a moment, to see what it was that gave her trouble, she noticed that she was standing in a puddle of dark red liquid. But she did not have time to investigate where it had come from or what it was, as she already heard the last guard charging at her. With more effort than she had anticipated, she reared up and struck his head from both sides with her iron-clad hoofs. The crunching sound that followed it satisfied her a great deal. What she had not anticipated, however, had been the force of the charging changeling. Even as she had crushed its head between her hoofs, the force of its charge drove his body forward, burying his horn deep in her chest. Pinkie let go of the lifeless form of the changeling as she coughed up blood and fell to her right side. Now she could see what the red liquid had been that had almost made her slip earlier. It had been her own blood. A piece of wood was buried deep inside her left flank. With some effort, Pinkie drew the changeling's horn from her chest, biting back the tears that formed in her eyes. She had been reckless and made a stupid mistake. Now that the adrenaline left her body, she felt the pain from the wounds and had to clench her teeth to keep herself from screaming. She had planned this to be a reconnaissance mission, but her anger had overtaken her. Slowly she dragged herself to the window she had jumped through earlier. In the distance she could hear the shouts of other guards that came this way, so she had to hurry. But it was so hard. Her head felt light, and her legs were like pudding. She fell down the stairs to the basement, in which her super-secret tunnel ended, breaking one of her forelegs and losing 2 of her tramplers. Laying there in the darkness, with her back against the stone wall, a puddle of blood forming under her, the last thing Pinky heard was the clip-clop of running hooves and a concerned voice. A few minutes earlier, Twilight had opened her eyes and looked around. Her head hurt and she felt bad. She remembered Fluttershy's death and was close to going back into her depression when she noticed a draft blowing over her. That must have been what had awoken her in the first place. She looked around, but she knew there were no windows here. All the fresh air their home had came magically from Mount Unicornia itself. As her gaze fell on the bookshelf near the rear of the room, however, she gasped in surprise and jumped out of bed. The shelf was pushed to one side, revealing a small hole in the wall, barely big enough for a pony to squeeze through. Twilight looked over to Pinky's bed as her suspicion was confirmed. The pink party pony was gone. Immediately she crawled into the hole, even so all her senses told her it was a bad idea. She had already lost Fluttershy. She would not lose another one of her friends if she could help it.